Great, good morning everybody. Wow, what an amazing start. It's a real honour to be here. And before I kicked off, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. But as Victoria has described, I do a lot of different things. And it means that introductions can often take a while. And it's always been this way for me. And when I was younger, I used to think that this was a real problem. Not just because it meant that introductions took ages, but because I thought it was a sign of immaturity. And I thought that one day I would grow up and just do one thing and be admitted into the land of adulthood. And then as the years went by, I began to see that leading such a plural life was valid and valuable. And so decided to embrace it. And as Victoria has described, I went to co-found different organizations. I write drama for film and TV. I develop the field of systems change. And I do everything from creating immersive audio projects to running political campaigns. And have this very rich and rewarding working life. So that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is that leading a life that challenges norms is incredibly challenging at times. Doing things differently, being on the edge of change, is often a very uncomfortable place to be. And I realised recently that I spend quite a lot of my time in a kind of state of mild terror. And so when I was asked to come and talk today about courage, I said yes immediately, because I thought that I'm pretty well qualified, given that I'm scared most of the time, and still manage to get stuff done. So we're going to be diving into that today. I'm going to start by talking about the project that's required the most courage from me over the last year. And then I'm going to pull out some insights about courage and finally leave you all with a set of questions so you can do your own courage inventory in about 15 minutes. So let's dive in. So I want you to take yourself back to Tuesday, the 18th of April last year. You probably can't remember what you were doing. If you were in London, it was a very sunny day. The birds were singing, the leaves were on the trees, the flowers were blooming, and everything felt like it was good with the world. Until midday, when our Prime Minister made an announcement. And she declared that we were going to be having a snap election, that in 6 weeks' time we were going to be going to the polls. And as someone who is very politically engaged, this threw my world into disarray. I was incredibly concerned about what this was going to mean, particularly for young people having a say in the future of the country. And so I was like, well, I've got to do something. And the next day there was a meeting for people working in civic tech. So I went to this meeting, I had some ideas, but I just wasn't sure, I wasn't sure if any of my ideas were good. And basically I felt like this. I felt like a deer in the headlights and spent 2 weeks, which in a 6-week election campaign is quite a long time, feeling like a deer in the headlights. And I was just like, I had some ideas, were they good ideas? And what if they didn't work? And I had lots of other work on. And then luckily, someone I'd spoken to at that civic tech event sent me an email, and he was like, there's a few other people I think you should talk to, because you've all got kind of similar ideas. And so we had this incredible phone call, and at the end of it, me and these 4 other women decided to do something. We didn't know what, but we were going to do something. And then the next day, we uncovered this fact, which was that young women are the least likely demographic to vote. And this shocked us. And it particularly shocked us because one of the reasons that young women don't vote is because they think they don't know enough. And so for us to see low self-esteem playing out at the ballot box was really concerning. So we were galvanized. We were like, okay, we are now going to do something about this. And so we decided to run what we called an emergency election hack. We invited people we knew from advertising, entertainment, and PR with 4 days' notice, and everybody came. And so these are some photos from the hack. And in the space of an evening, this group of 30 people came together and started to create projects, like all kinds of projects that were all around young women and voting. Like that was the brief we gave them. And then the next morning we woke up and suddenly we had all these teams of people working on stuff, and we were like, well, we should give this a name. Let's call it SHEvotes, and then let's share that creative brief with a wider community. And so we put that out. We started kind of getting our PR team together, trying to raise some money. And then things started to happen. Like, crazy things started to happen. Like, Wa Nails started to do SHEvotes manicures. We had a baker do SHEvotes donuts. We had all these artists starting to produce creative content. We had like a father of 3 daughters in Brighton paint a SHEvotes mural, which went on to become the best performing piece on social. We had the SHEvotes lipstick selfie, and as the kind of PR team really kicked in, we started to get people tweeting and sharing on social and really getting influencers who speak to young women to take up the message. And then, we've got a week to go, and things just start going crazy. Like, we get given all these low-cost billboards, both digital and fly posters as well. We end up producing a comedy video based in a toilet about young women and voting. And when we have different platforms that take up the message. And one of the things about the campaign was it was ownerless. So we said to platforms, make it your own, make it work for your audiences, which meant that everyone from, Project Love to Pretty 52 to Galdem made it their own. And so it felt native to very different kinds of women. Election day came, it continued to get this incredible coverage, and women started sharing their selfies at the polling booths, and it was women who'd never voted before. And we're all doing our day jobs. Like, this is happening in the evenings, in the gaps. And at the end of the day, once we've done the maths, we discover that we've reached 20 million people in 2 weeks with a budget of 6K. And that, plus the election result, kind of left us reeling. And we were like, what just happened there? And that's one way of telling that story. But there's another way of telling that story, which is all about how terrifying it was on a daily basis. How, as a team, we were constantly having to do things that we had never done before and that we were very nervous about doing. And so I'm going to kind of pull out some of the things that I've learned about courage through that process. And the first thing is that courage isn't a feeling. So you don't need to feel courageous to do courageous things. So the first 2 weeks of that election campaign, I was waiting to feel courageous. I was like, well, when I feel courageous, then I can act. But actually, courage isn't a feeling. And the way that I actually feel when I'm being courageous is a mixture of dread and fear and nausea. Like, that's what I feel. And so if courage isn't a feeling, what is it? Courage is an action. So courage is literally about movement. Fear is about staying still. Courage is about moving into uncertainty, and fear is about staying with the known. And the thing about courage is it's just about the next step. So it's not about knowing where it's all going to lead. Like, we had no idea where that campaign was going to go at the start. But it was just about being able to take the next step. Courage isn't about lone riders. So I think we have a myth about courage in that, it's what you do when you're standing on a windy hilltop and you dig deep by yourself and you find your courage alone. And in my experience, that's not how courage flourishes. Courage flourishes when you are surrounded by people who make being courageous feel inevitable and easy. So we could not have done that campaign without an incredibly supportive core team. And we had this, so the toilet video. So I was the person in the team responsible for the toilet video. So this was a comedy video based in a ladies' toilet, featuring 9 female comedians and then some famous people, that was pulled together in about 5 days with no budget. And I have never produced a comedy video before. I certainly haven't produced one in a ladies' toilet with that little notice and no budget. And whilst there was an extraordinary team, the idea came from a young creative in advertising. We matched her up with a brilliant comedy production company and who brought on a great director. So there's an incredible team of people behind it. I was freaking out, 3 times a day at least in the run-up to that. But because we had such an incredible core team, I could go onto our Slack channel and be like, I'm freaking out. We haven't found a ladies' toilet yet, and we're shooting in 36 hours. And the team were there, and they would either try and help me find a solution, or they'd just kind of, tell me it was going to be okay. And so this is our Slack channel, and this is our morale channel. So, whenever we were freaking out, someone would post a video on the morale channel, and we just kind of all have a moment. And I think the whole process really reminded me that courage isn't about being this kind of lone, impermeable individual, but it is about being someone who is in a team and who can be vulnerable, which leads on to this, which is about being heartfelt. So, courage is literally about being heartfelt because the word comes from the French word for cœur, which is heart. And when I think about courage being heartfelt, I think about that in 2 ways. So the first is, you have to be able to know what your heart is feeling. So you have to know what makes your heart beat faster. And that might be stuff you love, but it also might be things that make you angry, that concern you, that outrage you. And the reason that you need to know these things is because those issues or activities are the ones that will enable you to move in the face of fear. Your feelings of anger or joy or outrage will be what helps move you into that first action. And remember, courage is just about the first step and then the next step. And then the other part of being courageous is about being vulnerable. And I'm still working on this because I have had an idea that, being visible and being public is about being perfect. And we know that it's not. And so even last week, I was doing a talk and I was really terrified about it. And I woke up that morning and as I was having my breakfast, I was just falling into this imposter syndrome vortex. And I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. They shouldn't have invited me. I'm not qualified. And so I posted something on Instagram about it. And I don't normally post that kind of thing on Instagram. And what it meant was that when I was hiding in the toilet 5 minutes before I went on, and desperately looking around for an escape route, can I fit out that vent? I suddenly had all of these really supportive messages that pushed me over the line, that pushed me into the action that is courage. So being vulnerable really helps other people support your courage. Yeah, and so courage is so subjective. So we can't compare courages. So at the first part of my career, I worked as an anthropologist and would be working in very remote and dangerous parts of the world. And people would often say to me, oh my God, you're so brave going there. And I was like, no, because that doesn't scare me. Answering my phone? That scares me. So who in this room is okay about answering their phone? Raise your hands. Yeah, so like at least half the room. And now if I was going to get competitive about courage, every time I saw someone answering their phone seemingly without fear, I'd be like, oh my God, they're so brave. Like, they're so much braver than I am. But of course, you're not necessarily being brave when you answer your phone because it might not scare you. So courage is this very nuanced thing. And I am really into this idea of creating a taxonomy of courage. So how can you classify all the different ways that you are courageous? Because there isn't one kind of courage. Courage is a word like love and beauty that has an infinite number of meanings. And I think when we think courage is one thing, it blinds us to all the other ways that we are courageous in our lives. And so when I was thinking about it this week, I thought about the bits of my life where I really need courage at the moment, because I think classifying your courage is both about understanding where you've been courageous and where you still need to be courageous. And so, I still need to be courageous with answering the phone. That is still a thing. So when it comes to sharing my fictional writing, like I can write articles and I'm fine about those getting published. But I still need courage when I share drama. I need courage when I go and ask for a pay rise, when I have to negotiate anything. And of late, I have needed courage when it comes to dancing. So a few years ago, I had a back injury that left me very debilitated. And it's taken a while just to be able to move around. And I was at a party over New Year on the dance floor and realised I was literally standing still, that I didn't know how to dance anymore. And I'm someone who has danced since a very little girl. And I realised how scared I was of dancing. I was really scared of hurting myself again. And so I was like, listening to my own message, I was like, okay, I need courage in this area. And I need to take the first step. And so for me, the first step was going to a dance class and standing in the back, like literally in the dark at the back, doing all the movements in like really small ways. And I was fine. And so the next week I went back and I did it again, and it was okay. And so then, thinking about courage involving other people, I was like, well, Lent is coming up, and people normally give things up for Lent, right? And I was like, well, I'm going to take something up for Lent. I am going to dance every day for 40 days. And thus, 40 days of dancing was born. I think I've got about another 10 days left. So I've been doing a lot of dancing. And last week, I was at a party on a dance floor and suddenly realised that I'd been dancing for about 10 minutes without fear. And that was a huge moment. Where I really saw the power of taking small steps and building community around the things that you find scary. So here's a handy summary of everything I've just said. I think for me, the most important thing is remembering that courage isn't a feeling. Because I think we can all spend a lot of our lives waiting to feel courageous. And if we do that, like in the words of Carrie Ann's beautiful song, think of all the words that will be left unsaid. Think of all the lives that will be left unlived. Think of all the love that is left to give if you wait to feel courageous. So don't wait. Don't wait to feel courageous. Just act. And I'm going to leave you with this courage inventory. So it's a way of you getting into relationship with your courage. Because I think all of us will find something different in courage. It will mean something different to us all. So I want you to get to know your courage better. And the first part of that is thinking about where you've been courageous over the past year and celebrating it. And I can't emphasize enough, celebrate that. Do something that is just about celebrating your courage in whatever way works for you. And then understand what uncourage feels like for you. And I've purposefully not said fear or given a name to that emotion, because I think uncourage, not being courageous, feels different to all of us. So for me, when I'm not being courageous, it's actually, as I was in the first 2 weeks of that election campaign, what I feel is like, I'm not sure, I'm just not going to think about it, I'm just going to procrastinate. And that's what not being courageous is like for me. It isn't about being scared. I just feel this weird, like, head in the sand, putting off decisions. So for me, that's what uncourage feels like. But for you, it will be very different. But know what that's like, because then when you feel that in life, you will know that that's a place you need to be courageous. As opposed to just thinking, oh, I'm feeling a bit rubbish and not doing anything. And then finally, think about where you'd like to be courageous in your life. And then think about the smallest thing you can do. What's the tiniest next step? I mean, with the election campaign, it was literally like having that call. When we started that call, afterwards, we discussed it as a group. None of us wanted to do anything around the election. We were all like, this terrible kind of juggernaut is coming towards us, but we just don't know what to do. But all of us took that first step of having the call, which changed everything. So be gentle with yourselves. Don't wait to feel courageous, and take the first baby step. And I can't wait to see what courageous acts results. So thank you for your time and your attention. The question was, have I danced today? The answer is no. And I don't think I'm going to dance in front of you all, even though this is an event about courage. But great question. Yeah. So the question was, why am I scared about picking up the phone when I speak so confidently in front of lots of people? I don't know, I'm weird. I don't know, it's just, it's been there for like most of my adult life. I really hate answering the phone. No rationality there. So the question was how earlier in my career did I do it? When I thought I had to focus on one thing, did I focus on one thing? It's a great question. So I spent a few years kind of like pivoting between things. So because I thought I had to do one thing, I'd try and stop doing everything. I'd do one thing, and then after a few years, I'd kind of do a completely different thing. And it was just a bit like that. I always felt like I had to choose between this or that. And in my case, between like creativity and strategy. And it was really painful. I just wish that someone had told me when I was a lot younger that you can do both, and that you will make a contribution to the world by being plural, instead of feeling like I had to cull these different parts of myself. And at the time, I couldn't see anyone else doing that, so I just thought that I was wrong, and it took time. It took time to be able to start to do things alongside each other and recognise that it was a valuable way of living a life. Great, so the question is about systems change. I'm going to try and think of what the very short answer to that is. So what motivated me to work in systems change was actually because I spent my early career working in international development overseas, and I saw that it was often very atomized approaches to solving very collective, complex problems, and that didn't work. That the kind of problems that we face today are so complex that we have to be systemic in how we solve them. And so it was actually after a final job in India that I came back and I was like, okay, we have to develop smarter ways of solving complex problems. and that was about 7 or 8 years ago. And so then started to develop this field of systems change in the UK with other people. As for what that involves, we can talk afterwards about that. Okay, so how do you identify moments when you need more courage? So for me, often it's a sense of stuckness. So I'll suddenly realise that I have been going through the same loop in my head with something for quite a long time, and that I need courage. So there's stuckness. There is actual fear, like, last week before getting up to speak, I just was feeling, full of dread and nausea. And I was like, yeah, definitely need some courage. And frustration. So, sometimes I'll be incredibly frustrated because there'll be something that I want to do and I'm not doing it, and I'm not doing it, and I'm still not doing it. And that is incredibly frustrating. So it can be a mixture of different feelings. So the questions about SHEvotes, was it organised or was it organic? Yes, it was very chaotically organised. That's an answer. It was ownerless, so we really wanted it to be as organic as possible. And so I think one of the things that enabled it to spread really quickly was that we didn't own it. It wasn't a brand. There was no constraints around it. It was literally a hashtag and the insight that young women were the least likely demographic to vote. And we did not care what you did with that. And I think that was enormously freeing because it meant that different platforms and influencers could make it their own. And for us, it was crazy, and that we'd see incredible intersectional feminists using it and making it their own. And then we'd see like plastic surgeons tweeting it and making it their own. And we were like, okay, we don't have a brand that we need to protect. We just want as many young women to see this as possible. And so a lot of our work was about distribution and about championing people. So, because we had so many different artists producing work and so many different teams working on things. And so a lot of it was literally about going, you're doing great, high five, keep going. Like, we did so much cheerleading because everyone was working against the clock with no budget, doing something they'd never done before. Pretty much everyone involved was doing that. And so just as we needed support, we, as a core team, we did a lot of cheerleading to help people sustain themselves. So the question is about how do you do so much without burning out? Yeah, definitely working on that one. It's a real issue. And sometimes I get it right and sometimes I don't. I think I have... the way I structure my day, I have a morning routine that I stick to pretty religiously that involves activities that root and ground me. I know the things that sustain me and make sure I inject them in my life. And so I guess I'm someone if I think about cutting something out, then I will just do more. So the way that I stop myself burning out is by doing more of the stuff that stops me burning out. So in this case, it will be being out in nature more, taking more breaks, a lot of stuff around physical exercise. But how do I know what needs more focus is a really interesting question, because a lot of the work we do around systems is about these principles of emergence. So the kind of balance between strategy and emergence. And obviously you have to have strategies, but you have to be able to be responsive and adaptable to things as they emerge. And that is it's a tension that I hold both through my work and through my life. I can be very strategic about what I want to work on over the next year. And then all kinds of stuff happens, like that election, that I just couldn't predict. And so have to have enough flex to be able to fit those in. But also, time is a funny thing, I don't know. I don't know how weird it is to say that time isn't linear, because on the one hand it is the most linear thing, but I found, it's quite elastic. Oh, it's a great question about courage and storytelling. So I think stories are really closely related to courage. Stories of courageous people enable me to be courageous, especially stories of courageous women. Through the whole SHEvotes campaign, constantly going back to the suffragettes and being like, if we think this is scary, like, we aren't on hunger strike, we aren't chained to railings, we're not throwing ourselves in front of horses. Like, they were incredibly courageous women. And so definitely stories of courage helped me be more courageous. And then there was a question about courage and my stories. One of the things, so they say that writers always write the same story in different forms. And a few years ago, one of the things I realized was that the story I tell is often a story of there being some injustice, someone discovering it, trying to stop it, and then getting killed. I always kill the protagonist. This autumn, for a feature film project I'm working on, I changed the ending, and she lives. So I guess the way that I inject courage in my stories is changing.
We will be around here afterwards if you have more questions for Ella. But now we'll move on to community minutes. Ella, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.